And not only does do these ultra processed foods affect our gut microbiome, they also affect our kids' brains. And, it probably due in large part to this gut-brain connection. But one frightening study that I saw was that the ultra-processed foods changes your child's brain morphology, brain structure. Wow. So it can shrink their white matter and shrink their overall brain volume.
Welcome to the Soaring Child podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. Hello, parents. This is Dana Kay here with another edition of the Soaring Child podcast. Guess what? Well, today's episode, it's kind of a bit of a homecoming because we've got Dr. Elisa Song with us again. Do you guys remember her? She was actually the first guest I ever had on this podcast. And back then she shared her wisdom on telltale signs of ADHD in young children, why it's vital to highlight and embrace your child's zone of genius, and how to optimize your child's diet and lifestyle, and definitely the role of medication in treating ADHD. Well, since then on this podcast, we've exceeded 100 episodes. We've shared a lot of chats, a lot of laughs, a lot of learning. And so having Dr. Song back kind of feels like closing a circle, but also opening up a whole new conversation that is going to be full of discoveries and insights. And if you don't remember Dr. Elisa Song, or if you're new to the podcast, she is an integrative pediatrician and a pediatric functional medicine expert. But most importantly, she's a mama of 2 thriving children. She has dedicated her career to helping parents and practitioners bridge the gap between conventional and holistic pediatrics with an evidence-based, pediatrician-backed, parent-approved approach. That is like a tongue tie. Dr. Song has lectured around the world, and she is an amazing lecturer at leading integrative and functional medicine conferences, parenting events, and she's also been featured in hundreds of top podcasts, including this one.
Yes.
And online media. So listeners, grab your favorite cup of something nice, and let's catch up with Dr. Song diving into the latest on natural approaches for ADHD. Dr. Song, it's fantastic to have you here again.
Oh, I always love talking to you, Dana, and it's been way too long. So I'm so honored to be here.
Yes, no, thank you so much. I still can't believe that you were my first guest. So
I know, right?
And we've surpassed 100 episodes.
That's amazing. Yeah. So great. So needed. I mean, your podcast is amazing.
Thank you so much. Now, why don't we just sort of lay it out there? What is the current state of children's and teens' mental health?
Well, it's not good, right? I mean, as anyone listening to this podcast, it's not good because your kids are likely suffering. And, through the pandemic, the American Academy of Pediatrics really noted that we are in a state of emergency for children's mental health. We were in a state of mental health emergency long before the pandemic. I mean, it's not new news, but really during the pandemic, it shined a glaring light on really what we need to be paying attention to for our kids. By the time kids are 18, 1 in 2 will be diagnosed with any mental health disorder. And oftentimes, as we know for kids with ADHD, they often have comorbid anxiety or depression or whatever other acronyms you want to give, ODD, OCD, right? It's not that they come in isolation. So the rise in anxiety, we know that, and this is in teenage girls, we've seen especially that by the teenage girls, 1 in 3 are diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And what's even more alarming is that 1 in 4 will have seriously thought of suicide. Right. And, 1 in 10, by the time they're 18, will have tried. And so we need to step back and think, what are we doing? How are we as a society supporting or not supporting our children? What are some of the underlying root causes for all of these mental health concerns and neuropsychiatric concerns that we as parents and teenagers and tweens and kids, that we can actually do something about? And there's a lot that we can do. It's just that it's not necessarily, being shouted out, by the medical profession or widely known, which is why, Donna, the work that you're doing in educating parents is so important, and why podcasts are so important, because it's a way to get the information out there. And for parents and kids and teenagers to feel empowered, because we can see we can hear all these statistics and feel kind of disheartened and think, well, I guess that's just the way of the world now. And yes, it is the way of the world now, but it doesn't have to be the way of the future. And we have the knowledge now to take steps that can really and truly make a difference for your kids' mental health now and also in their future.
Yeah, I think that is, you've really highlighted it there. And I love that you highlighted the fact that we need to look at what those underlying root causes are that are contributing to this increase in some of those statistics that you shared on 1 in 2 by the age of 18 diagnosed with anxiety, for me is just shocking. And so, look, one of those root causes I talk a lot about on this podcast is the gut-brain connection.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to do a bit of a deep dive, I think, with you today on that. And so for listeners who sort of might be new to this concept, could you explain that gut-brain connection and really, its significance in the overall health, particularly in children with these, mental health issues?
Yeah. So when we talk about the gut-brain connection, we want to start with the gut. And the reason we do that is because many listeners will have heard of the vagus nerve. That vagus nerve is the two-way sort of information superhighway between the gut and the brain. And what many people don't recognize is that 80% of that communication, that traffic, is occurring from the gut to the brain. Mm-hmm. And our gut has a nervous system that looks very much like our brain's nervous system. And what's wild is that our gut can actually live without our brain, but our brain can't live without our gut, right? And so, when we're talking about our children's mental health, what do we really need to look at? Well, we always need to look at their guts. And to highlight how important the gut microbiome is, when we look at infant studies, and we can see that the gut microbiome has a very sensitive developmental window between about 0 and birth through about 2.5, 3 years of age. And I will go back even more, even to preconception and in utero, because the state of mama's microbiome, both her intestinal microbiome and her vaginal microbiome, her mammary duct, her breast, duct microbiome, all of that informs how the baby's microbiome will start off in life, in addition to how you were born, the method and fed. So during the initial critical window of microbiome development, we can see this parallel in this explosion of diversity in the gut microbiome of an infant, and this explosion of these synapses and connections in children's brains. And we know that now that most of what's driving this is actually the microbiome is driving a lot of these synaptic connections that are going on in the brain. A toddler's brain has twice as many synapses as an adult brain. Wow. I mean, trillions. And we don't get to keep them all, right? Mm-hmm. And so we want to make sure that all the appropriate healthy ones are made. Now, any disruption to the gut microbiome in those early stages especially can set the stage for disruption to optimal neurodevelopment. And, I say this not to have any mama or, parent go back and look at things and feel guilty about things, right? We have enough reason to feel guilty, right? We have enough things that we blame
100%.
ourselves for, right? So we don't do that. But it's to know your child's story, where they're starting from, and how things may have unfolded. But some of the studies looking at the developing gut-brain connection have found that disruption to the gut microbiome, through antibiotics, which are the single biggest acute disruptor of the microbiome, in infancy. So antibiotics given to an infant, even in utero exposure, can significantly increase by up to 50% the risk of that child having mental health concerns by the time they're older kids or teenagers, right? The higher the rounds of antibiotics, the higher the risk. And the greatest risk seemed to occur if antibiotic exposure occurred before 6 months of age, because of that critical window where everything is just exploding and connecting. So if your kiddo had antibiotics when they're younger and they had, multiple rounds of antibiotics, we can't go back and change that. It's just, so we sit with it and then we let it go and we know, okay, now I know that there's very likely some gut microbiome disruption that is going on that is at least one of the factors, right? And it's never just one. I mean, I have families who are looking for the one root cause. And I'm going to tell you, there is hardly ever a time where there's just one root cause, right? It's more like there are multiple underlying little hits that happen. And then there happens to be that one thing that the straw that broke the camel's back, right? It kind of tipped the scale, right? And that's what we remember. But we have to remember there's a whole backstory that occurred that kind of created a higher risk for imbalance. So why is it that a disruption to the gut microbiome is, so important for the brain and can inform the risk for later mental health concerns, including ADHD, as a neurodevelopmental concern? Well, we know that the vast majority of neurotransmitters are made by our gut microbiome. So that's where, like in Donna's supplement that uses a psychobiotic, right? What are psychobiotics? They are specific probiotic strains that are known to optimize dopamine and serotonin levels. Well, we know that our microbiome and our healthy microbiota, probiotics, are responsible for making up to 90% of serotonin, which helps us feel calm and relaxed and helps us fall asleep. At least 50% of dopamine is made in our microbiome, which if you are a mom of an ADHD kid, dopamine is so important, right? To optimize for focus and attention and reward, and also can be implicated in addictions, which are so common in kids with ADHD. But it doesn't stop there. There are neurotransmitters like GABA and acetylcholine, melatonin. Our gut makes 400 times more melatonin than our brain. Wow. And so it makes sense that if we do not have a healthy balance of all of these beneficial bacteria that make our neurotransmitters, there's no way that we can have as optimal and healthy brain development or brain functioning. Now, it is a two-way street though, right? It goes both ways. And so this is where the vagus nerve comes into play with the calming rest and digest state, the state that we get into when, we're in the zone or we're walking in nature or we're hugging our kids, right? It's that state that is just that calm, alert, healing state. And we've also shown in research that when we are in a stressed state and the vagus nerve is not really kicking in, but our sympathetic nervous system is getting us into fight or flight, that can disrupt the gut microbiome. Psychological stress can trigger something called leaky gut, which many of you may be familiar with. On the flip side, engaging our vagus nerve with breath work, walking in nature, laughing, all the, lots of different ways, that alone can improve your gut microbiome diversity and function. And what I love about this one particular study, that improvement occurred independent of diet. Right. Because sometimes diet can be one of the most challenging things as a parent to think about shifting. But yeah, it's amazing how intertwined they are and what difference it can make.
Wow, we've got a definite gut expert on our hands here with you today, Dr. Elisa Song, and I love the perspective that you're bringing. You know, you've touched on some of the factors that can disrupt our children's microbiome. So, but let's go in a little bit deeper. You know,
yeah.
You've discussed antibiotics. You've discussed sort of disruptions. You know, in the mum's gut microbiome, you know, during labor or whatever it may be. What are some of the most significant factors that sort of disrupt our child's and teens' microbiomes today?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's a little different for our infants and toddlers than it is going to be for our tweens and teens. You know, but not so different. I will say one of the single most insidious and persistent and ever present disruptors are our ultra processed foods. I mean, that's so ubiquitous. And, you know, even, and I'm going to say this, you know, with love, because I did this as well, even as a holistic pediatrician, even thinking that I'm buying, you know, the healthier packaged foods without reading necessarily all the ingredients and understanding how some of these ingredients can directly harm your child's gut microbiome, I was doing the best I thought I could, right? And so it's really through no fault of our own, but now we need to change that narrative and know, all right, we can't just take for at face value the front of the package saying healthy, gluten-free, you know, made with you know, real fruit. Doesn't matter, right? You know, you bet the food industry spends, you know, a gazillion dollars on marketing and advertising psychology, right? To draw you in. So this is the case where we absolutely don't want to judge a book by its cover. We flip the package over, right? 100%. And these ultra processed foods, you know, they are designed. There literally are like these mad scientists in the food industry that are designing these foods so that you have a mouth feel that lights up your dopamine center and you want the next bite, you crave it, right? That they know the exact proportions of sugar and fat and salt to make sure that it's as addictive as possible, right?
It makes me just so infuriated. My blood is boiling as you're saying this, even though I know that this is the case. It infuriates me.
Yep. As it should, right? I mean, we as parents, we should now knowing this, we need to demand better for our kids. You know, from the FDA, you know, that is supposedly, you know, trying to preserve the interests of our children. And yet, okay, this is where, you know, as trusting parents, right? Trusting that, you know, nothing is going to go into our baby's food that shouldn't be in there. Well, we know in the last few years, there have been found unacceptable levels of heavy metals in infant foods. One of the shocking things, there's a type of a category of food additives called emulsifiers that are particularly harmful for the gut microbiome. And there are emulsifiers that are found in the ready-to-feed liquid infant formulas that are at higher levels than what are known to be harmful, right? So, you know, we just need to, now it's up to, you know, experts like you and, you know, just really trying to get this word out to inform and educate families so that we can vote with our dollars, right? That makes a difference. And hopefully, you know, work on a broader level to make some change. But, you know, these ultra processed foods, let's talk specifically about how they affect our kids' brains too. You know, these and the gut brain connection. So these emulsifiers, now, when you turn the package over, you're not going to see the word emulsifier. Okay, there are over 3,000 FDA approved ingredients, food additives, in this list that they keep called the Everything Added to Food in the United States list. And so in the category of emulsifiers, which can kill off beneficial bacteria, your probiotics, which can trigger leaky gut directly, you might see on the label carrageenan, mono and diglycerides, carboxymethylcellulose, polysorbate 80, right? So there's some of the things that you're going to see. So you have to be savvy. And you know what? This is where we need to teach our kids too. Kenzie, Bodie, and I, so Kenzie is 14, Bodie is 12. But even from the time they were younger, when we went to the grocery store, it was always an opportunity for us to, when they grab a package, hey, Mom, can I have this? And of course, it was a thing that had SpongeBob on it with the rainbow color or whatever. And I'd say, well, okay, let's take a look at I didn't say no right away. I said, sure, let's take a look at these ingredients and see, if you think these are still going to be something that's going to nourish your body and, make you feel strong. Right. And so it's a great teaching opportunity. And not only do these ultra processed foods affect our gut microbiome, they also affect our kids' brains. And, it probably due in large part to this gut brain connection. But one frightening study that I saw was that the ultra processed foods changes your child's brain morphology, brain structure. Wow. So it can shrink their white matter, and shrink their overall brain volume. I mean, wow. Scary, right? Very as scary. opposed to a higher quality diet, which resulted in more brain folds. I mean, everyone's seen at least a picture of a brain, right? All those lovely folds, they're there for a reason. We want lots of folds. So improve that folding. It's called gyrification. And an increase in gray matter. And we know that ultra processed foods are associated with, ADHD and anxiety and depression, in younger kids, also in adults as well. And on the other end of the age spectrum with cognitive decline and Alzheimer's. Yeah. So they are absolutely affecting our brain. Now, this is not the end of the story though, right? Because even though it in a short amount of time, it takes only like 2 months for a steady diet of ultra processed foods to change your brain. We can reverse that trend with a steady diet of gut nourishing, brain nourishing foods. So it's not like it's a done deal. And as parents, our kids' brains are still developing. So plastic means lots of opportunities to regrow and remodel. So it's never too late. Ideally, we start younger, but even if your kids are a little older, that's okay. We know that boys' brains don't stop developing until they're in their late 20s, we know that.
We've got two boys over here. I want to say, and I want to just sort of like add to that or support that in a way that, my older son, who's also 14, perfect example of how we were able to change that trajectory. Back in the day, he was eating those ultra processed foods. He was having having issues going on with his microbiome. He was induced early. He was put on antibiotics within the first 2 weeks of being born. He was on a CPAP machine, given medication to increase his lungs and things like that. When he was 4, he was put on the 3 medications, but now he is 14. We have healed his gut. We are not eating all of those ultra processed foods anymore. He hasn't been on meds for years and he's thriving. So it is not a lost cause for any families listening out there, even if you're starting at the age of 14. As Dr. Song just said, boys in particular are still developing by, I think my husband, what is he, like 44, maybe still developing.
That's so funny. Yeah. But, the other thing too is as we talk about ultra processed foods, I also want to try to help take some of the power struggles and the conflict out of it for parents, because once you sort of heal up your child's gut and you build these foundations of resilience in their microbiome, the resilience piece of it means that, okay, if they go out with their friends and they decide that I'm going to do it. I know it's going to not be good for my brain. I know this because mom told me about my microbiome and gut brain connection, but I still am going to have the Takis with the red dye 40, right? So, and then, we might have this urge to kind of freak out. Oh my gosh, now what do we do? We're going to start from ground zero. No. A resilient microbiome means if once we're healed, okay, I said once we're healed, because in that healing phase, right, we may really need to be more on the, super clean, nearly 100%, right? But once that happens, your microbiome wants to return to the state that it was in. So if it's optimized, and most of the time, it's getting all the things it needs to be nourished and maintain a healthy microbiome state. That one little rainbow colored, frappuccino, or, that whatever, the prime hydration drink with sucralose and whatever, it can bounce back, right? Yeah. So that way we can say, look, honey, you're with your friends. I know we know how to make decisions that are going to make our brains and our bodies and our microbiomes feel good, right? Stay healthy and happy. I'm going to trust what decisions you make, right? If you choose something that doesn't make your body or brain feel very good, we're going to notice that, right? You're going to pay attention and connect the dots, right? Because we want them to connect how they're feeling, with the foods they eat. And, know that when we live, for the most part, 80-90% of the time, we're creating this health bubble in our microbiome. It can bounce back. So that way we don't have to, flip out as much.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. We've been, as I said, we've been through that healing journey with my older son, and he is 14 now. He does go out. He does make those not so good choices, but he's okay because majority of the time, we eat super clean, and his gut microbiome is healed, and it is, it is working well. So I want you to sort of just give some strategies quickly to the listeners. What do you recommend for sort of creating that gut brain resilience, as you called it, in our children, especially those struggling with ADHD?
So, we can think about, what I would say is, you want to pick the lowest hanging fruit, right? Because there are multiple strategies that we can take to optimize your child's gut microbiome, which then will optimize your gut-brain connection. And like I said, sometimes food is going to be one of the most challenging things to tackle first, right? And, with food, when we're thinking about nourishing our gut microbiome and our brain, those psychobiotics, right, those beneficial bacteria that are making your child serotonin, dopamine, GABA, melatonin, well, they need something to feed on to make those, right? And so, we want to know what those things are. And that's fiber, prebiotics, it's vegetables and fruits and legumes and nuts and seeds. And those phytonutrients, all of those colorful, fruits and vegetables are going to act as prebiotics, but also, support your microbiome in making other cofactors that are needed for neurotransmitter production. And of course, fermented foods. In fact, this one study found that fermented food could reduce social anxiety.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. So, but then, if your children really are in the moment still really addicted to ultra processed foods and, very selective, and you're working on their palate, simply working on what things to remove from their diet and better swaps can make a huge difference. I mentioned Takis because that's that was a huge discussion for us, but teaching your kids how to read food labels, identifying these ingredients, and being able to choose swaps that they're still happy with, that taste really yummy, right? But don't have all the artificial dyes, the too much added sugar, the food emulsifiers, and all of the FDA approved additives that are just they're wrecking your kids' tummy and their brains. So with Takis, and I go through this with my patients in the office and my kids, we've gone through this exercise where, we'll look at a bag of Takis look at the ingredients. How many do you recognize? Not many. Mm-hmm. Oh, it says artificial everywhere, right? And so then, and I'll have a bag of, Trader Joe's rolled corn tortilla chips. So we can compare. It's better, right? There's still some ingredients that I'm not totally sure about, but it's better. And then we move over here to the Siete Fuego chips. Really good, right? Yeah. My son loves Siete Fuego chips, and Siete chips now are available in, I was at the Walgreens the other day, and they had, a little shelf of Siete chips, different kinds. So anyhow, if they learn how to make those swaps so that they can hang out with their friends, but they can choose a hydration drink that isn't Gatorade, right? Mm-hmm. Neon blue Gatorade, and they can still hang out, right?
Yeah.
They're happy for it. They enjoy the taste still, and their brains are happier, right? So that's one thing. Another thing, one of the factors that is, when you ask, well, what are the major factors? Well, it's the foods, but also this, persistent, chronic, unmanageable psychological stress, right? Mm-hmm. Psychological stress can disrupt our gut microbiome in a matter of an hour, right? Within 1 hour. And but so I back up, because then we need to define what stress is, right? Because stress is not necessarily a bad thing. Mm-hmm. And, we have to really rethink that as a population, right? As parents and as kids, because, a lot of us, the only tool we've had to manage stress is to try to avoid it, because we think all stress is bad, but I don't want any stress. Well, guess what? Having no stress may be more stressful and inflammatory to your body and brain than having some stress that you can overcome, right? So it's not about zero. It's about manageable levels of stress with the tools to overcome it. That's where your vagus nerve kicks in. That's where your sympathy, that's where, some of our kind of mindfulness work comes in. And when we talk to kids about mindfulness, what will they do? Roll their eyes. I want to do that, right? So we don't talk about it like that, yeah. Right? But the first thing I show kids is, when we talk about their gut microbiome, and I talk to them about all the trillions and trillions of microscopic friends or allies in their gut that are helping their brain. They're supporting you, right? We have 10 times more microbial cells in us than we have human cells. So when we think about what we're eating or how we're thinking and living, who are we affecting more, and who should we support, right? And so when I talk about how one of the best ways to nourish our gut microbiome, it's really focusing on how we're breathing, right? That's not an add-on, right? That's not I'm going today, I have to add on 30 minutes of meditation. No, it's not an add-on. We have to breathe every day, right? We have to breathe every moment, right? And so if we teach them how to do more diaphragmatic breathing, that belly breathing, right? Where we're keeping our shoulders down, and we're have this imaginary balloon in our belly. And as we inhale slowly, the balloon is expanding our belly. And as we exhale, the balloon is deflating. You can keep your hand on your chest if you're new to this, right? Or not yet as good at belly breathing. Keep your hands on your shoulders, because we don't want to breathe here. But this is where most of us breathe, right? And so for children, if they can, in that moment when they're stressed or just sitting there, notice how they breathe. Parents should do this too, right? Notice how you're breathing, and just take some slow breaths with your diaphragm, belly breathe. It helps them stop in that moment to regulate their nervous system, right? It helps them stop and think before they do their next thing, because sometimes that next thing is going to be something that they regret, right? And it helps engage their vagus nerve. By engaging their vagus nerve, it helps improve their microbiome, which then improves neurotransmitter production and improves how their brain is feeling. So, just that simple one thing. And, there are different, mindfulness breathing techniques, meditation apps, I mean, that are so good. And we can move into that. But I would say as a start, just really focusing on the breath can be the most powerful thing, because they can do that anywhere. If they're starting to get a little stressed or antsy in their seat, right? It's kind of squirming, wiggling in class, or like starting to bug their neighbor, and their neighbor's like, stop, they can just, okay, what should I do next? I'm going to focus on my breathing, right? And then from there, they can decide what their next step is. But it really, it's not just powerful for self-regulation and, just overall nervous system regulation, but really and truly for their microbiome too.
Wow. I love all the tips you're giving today. They're really just practical and easy, not for the parents to implement, but for the kids to actually do themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the hardest thing that us parents find is sort of like, well, how do you teach your kid that? And so you've shared a lot of that today. Now, before we end up, I want to just bring something up. A little birdie told me that you have a new book coming out very soon. Tell us about it.
I do. It's right behind me. It is called Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, an integrative pediatrician's guide to whole child resilience. Again, it's all about building resilience from a microbiome level all the way to their immune system, their brain, even their epigenetic potential. And everything we spoke about, a lot of this is modeled after a 6-week Healthy Belly, Happy You course that I taught to my kids' 3rd and 4th grade classroom, so 8 to 10-year-olds. And, when they learned about, all the trillions of microscopic buddies in their gut, I mean, they were like, oh, what? And they helped me sleep, and they helped me, get along with my friends. And so we went through, how to read food labels. We went through this fun, like, sugar counting game, and we made kombucha and sauerkraut, right? Because that's another. Yeah. When you want your kids to expand their palates, the best way is to get them cooking. And maybe they'll take a little bite and spit it out, but hey, at least they put it in their mouth, right? Mm-hmm. It will absolutely make a difference. But the book is full. I just really want it to be a practical guide for parents and for kids, and frankly, also for grandparents, because a lot of times, kids spend the weekend or holiday at grandma and grandpa's, and, it was a different time back then, right? And what is the role of a grandma and grandpa? It's to love your kids and give them all the treats they want. But and some of the treats you're like, no, And so I had one one grandma who read the book, and she, her eyes are totally open, and she's like, of course I want to make sure my grandkids are the healthiest possible. So she went home and spoke with her husband and said, we need to rethink what we're considering treats for our kids, and completely overhaul their pantry, so that. And mom was so happy because she's like, I don't have to nag my kids as much, and I don't have to nag my mom, their grandma, right? So,
so maybe Christmas time, hand them over a copy of that book. That's amazing, Dr. Elisa.
Right? I mean, when that grandma told me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good, because that's I remember the struggles with my mom. Yep.
No, I do the same. I remember, and I see it every day with the families that I work with. So that's awesome. Where can people find the book?
Anywhere books are sold. So of course on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. But if you want to support your indie bookstores, and at indie books and Books A Million, so pretty much anywhere, Target, Walmart.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. That is very, very exciting. I already have my copy of it, so I haven't actually read it yet, but I've got my copy, and I can't wait to get started. But thank you so much, Dr. Elisa Song, for joining me today, for coming back all these months or years later, sharing your knowledge and your experience with all our listeners. Excuse me. Please tell listeners where they can find and follow you online.
So the best place is my website, which is healthykidshappykids.com, or on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, and that's healthykids_happykids.
Amazing. Thank you once again for joining me today. Listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD, soar using natural strategies, visit our website at adhdthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.